What's going on? Johnson and Parker Ainsworth for a Locked On crossover. We got the Locked On Cougars, the Locked On Houston, Locked On Kansas Jayhawks here, and we're at Big 12 Media Days. We're going to be breaking it down. We've got some interesting quotes from some of the different coaches, and we're going to get into all that on today's episode of Locked On.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Locked On Crossover here. We're here at Big 12 Media Days in Kansas City at the T-Mobile Center. And, oh boy, we've had some fun quotes, to say the least. We've learned some good things from the different teams that are here and at this event. But honestly, we were talking a lot, like, what should we talk about on this show? And one of the things that we mentioned was about Jerome Tang. And so you can check out Locked On K-State if you want to hear more on them. You can also check us all out, obviously, anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page. But it would be about Jerome Tang declaring that Kansas State has the best point guard, shooter, and athlete in the country, which kind of got us brainstorming and thinking, like, who would even be our answers? Because I don't know if we fully agree with that. I do think PJ Haggerty's a very good player. I'll give him that. But who would our answers be for the guys in the Big 12? I think is a great question and one that honestly, like, we could both talk about guys from Kansas and Houston just to begin with. So let's kind of divvy this out. First of all, do you agree with Jerome Tang? Do you think they have all three of those things? And if so, should they be national title favorites?
I think that's really high praise, considering a year ago we might have said the same thing, right? And it didn't pan out that way by any stretch. Maybe it's because Tech is the team that beat Houston in their only Big 12 loss last year. I have trouble putting anyone in the conference above JT Toppin as far as an individual player goes. But y'all have a pretty talented freshman coming in too, so maybe it's a new guy we haven't seen play yet. Maybe I'm too much stuck in the past.
No, I mean, it is hard because it's like Toppin's going to be a walking 20-10 this year, you know. I do think Darryn Peterson, to me, is going to be the best player in the country, and from that perspective. But that's the thing, like with JT Toppin, he's a center. So if we are divvying this out and getting point guard, to me, Darryn Peterson's the best point guard because Kansas is going to play him as a point guard. Maybe he'll be defending wings more on the defensive side of the ball, but on the offensive side of the ball, he's going to be their point guard. And so it's like you have a guy who right now is, I don't know that you'd say a betting favorite because there's two other guys with DeBonta and Boozer that are in there too, but he's certainly one of the betting favorites to be the number one pick in the NBA draft. And if that guy's playing point guard for you, like PJ Haggerty's a really good player. He's an All-American, really good scorer, but there's a reason he's still in college, you know? So I don't know. I guess I would disagree with that just if we're talking our own conference here. And obviously Houston's got a guy you can make the conversation with too, with Milos Uzan.
Yeah, and with Uzan, I feel like it's specific to, like, hey, he fills that role as well as anyone can, and he might not be the one-and-done pro like Peterson or other freshmen in this conference who just go best player, right? But Milos is so gifted at what he does for Houston that I feel like fitting his role makes him a contender in this conversation. Best, like, athlete was part of this as well.
Yeah.
I don't know how you want to quantify athlete. I mean, Houston's got a guy that I think could play tight end in the NFL. I don't know.
I mean, could you argue JoJo Tugler's the best athlete? Because he's like a 6'7" center, but with wingspan and jumping and the physical nature of it, like he would certainly be up there too.
On the same, like, size playing a factor, we just saw Cole Pete walking around. That dude does not look 18, and I don't mean that like he's lying. I mean, like, oh my God, he's 18 years old.
He could dress up for Arizona's football team this weekend
Right
and like fit right in. And he'd probably be taller than some of those guys, but he's honestly, seeing AJ DeBonta in person, that was another, you know how sometimes you walk by guys and it's like, oh, you're listed 6'9", you're 6'8", and then you walk by them and you're like, you might be like 6'7", you know? There were a few guys, without naming names, that I noticed that was like, okay, you're listed 6'8", 6'9", you only look like 6'7". But with AJ DeBonta, I walked by him and went, you might be taller than I thought. I thought AJ DeBonta was like 6'8". I don't know. That dude might be like 7 feet tall. He's huge. He's gigantic. So, like, he's up there for best athletes too. Like, that dude just glides. He's got like the great first steps and everything like that. I think Flory Badunga is somebody I would kind of throw in there a little bit for Kansas, at least deserves consideration there.
Well, and we're really favoring the big guys that are sitting here breaking it down. And I probably wouldn't have assumed that when I would have thought, who's got the big vertical?
That's not going to be centers. Yeah.
No, right. Frankly, it typically feels like whatever one and done Baylor has for the flavor of the year.
I mean, and honestly, Tunde Yesufu, who's the answer to that, he's in this discussion too for best athlete in the league. Yes, 100%.
Just a different way to quantify what an athlete is. But apparently, it's PJ Haggerty, according to.
Well, no, for the athlete, it was they have a transfer from the JUCO ranks that he was mentioning there. Which again, if K-State really does have the best point guard, the best athlete, and the best three-point shooter in the country, Final Four? I mean, like, what are we talking here? Like,
and frankly, as much as I like Jerome and Coach Tang's doing a great job, if they really have those three things and don't make an Elite Eight.
Yeah, that puts pressure on themselves, right?
Like that's pretty damning, I would say, to say the least.
100%. And then the last one was the best shooter. I'm trying to think, like, best shooters in the conference. Obviously, Arizona.
I don't mean to cut you off. And I know this is going to be Parker's the hometown. I'm about to say it's Emmanuel Sharp.
And I was just trying to think of other guys that we would like want to mention.
I totally understand going to other guys and playing that and filling out a full like best shooter every position or shooter off the dribble or whatever. But like Emmanuel has been over 40% a couple years in a row now. He seems to shoot better the further back he gets. He's a senior. He's played for a long time under Sampson. They don't play at a high pace. He might not have the most three-pointers made at the end of the year because they just don't play enough possessions or all of that. But he's going to shoot at a high clip. And frankly, he's going to go for 4 for 6 more nights than not. Right?
Yeah,
like that's the way it
and
goes.
it's going to be the volume there too and the importance of those threes. He would probably be my pick. I'm just trying to think other guys that you would throw in there. Again, Anthony Del Orso at Arizona. That was the name I was looking for there. Baylor. I mean, Obi Agbim, the transfer from Wyoming. He's actually a really good shooter. Like, and I feel like Baylor always just has like one guard who's just gonna shoot really really well. So that would be somebody I would think of. Let's see. I mean, PJ Haggerty actually. I don't know. Maybe K-State does have.
Well, and I don't mean to keep going back to Tech, but Christian Anderson's pretty strong.
Going to have an awesome year, I think. Yeah.
Pretty strong, and frankly, he looked thicker, I think, than I realized he was, and maybe he put on some good weight or some of the offseason, but like I kind of thought of him as a slender guy. He's walking with his shirt off with his jersey on. I was like, oh, like that guy's got more meat on his bones than I think he did a year ago. So maybe
probably haven't given enough credit to Richie Anderson.
BYU.
He would be up there. Now, different types of shooters, though, right? Like Sharp is somebody who can do it off movement, he can do it on a set shot, he can do it off the dribble. Anderson can do it off movement and set shots. You don't really see him taking as many off the dribble.
No,
so maybe he's the best like set shooter. Maybe Sharp's the best overall shooter.
And without quantifying it, I guess truthfully, you're sitting here thinking like
shoot Honor Huff at West Virginia. There's so many names we could go through, honestly. But if there's a Big 12 fan watching this, they're like, why haven't you said this name?
And that does feel like one. I mean, while everyone might disagree with Jerome Tang's assessment of the Kansas State Wildcats, I do think one thing every coach has said and agreed upon is like the Big 12 is said to be the best conference all over again. That 1 year of the SEC or whatever, which I would contest a little bit. But that 1 year, that feels over. Every program sitting here saying, like, no, we have high hopes for the big picture of the season, not just within the Big 12. Kelvin said at one of the coaches' panels, he was like, honestly, the 8th or 9th team of this conference could go on an NCAA tournament run. You just don't know. And not to work too much into a very direct segue here, but Kelvin said something else that was really, really interesting about this conference and who the bell cow is. As we sit here, Kansas, Houston, and I want to get into that in 1 second, but we have, today's show is brought to you by some folks over at Quo. Quo is one of those tools that helps make huge differences for your business and business owners. It used to be called Open Phone, same great business phone system you've heard us talk about before, just a new name. And here's why it matters. Every missed call is money left on the table. When every customer conversation counts towards your bottom line to make sure that phone system can keep you connected 24/7. Quo's number one business phone system that streamlines customer communications. It works right through an app to your phone or computer, so no one carrying two phones or anything like that has to be the case anymore. I think of this more as the consumer, if I'm being really honest there, because I'm like, if I call someone and they don't answer, I'm going to the next one. Quo makes sure that doesn't happen, right? So your business does not have people ignoring you like I do. People don't answer the phone, which is way too many people in high school. That's a whole different conversation. See why over 90,000 businesses trust Quo from the open phone. Get started for free and get 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/lockedoncollege. That's QUO.com/lockedoncollege. You can even keep your own existing phone number for Quo. That didn't feel real. That's why I use no missed calls, no missed customers. Quo.
This episode's also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. NFL season's here, but we're in October. Everything is here, right? You got World Series, NFL, college football, college basketball. Basketball's obviously about to get started. Everything's going on right now, and you don't want to miss it with FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. You get $300 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. So pick a bet. Put down $5. If it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. That's things that you can use on like Houston to win the college basketball title, Kansas to win the college basketball title. I like Darryn Peterson 10-1 odds to win the Wooden Award. That's all I'm going to say. So you can check those out and plenty others over at FanDuel. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started with FanDuel. Okay, welcome back on our Locked Over crossover episode, Locked on Cougs with Houston, Locked on Jayhawks. I'm Derek Johnson. He's Parker Ainsworth. And, we were just talking about Kelvin Sampson. Let's actually throw it to the clip so we can hear directly from the head coach of Kelvin Sampson. Where's this clip coming from?
Chris Gardner, Houston Roundball Review, got the clip for us. Pretty good quality here. But here, Kelvin Sampson's got interesting thoughts, having won the Big 12 in his first 2 years in the Conference of Houston, on who the bell cow of the conference is.
Let's not get this thing twisted now. Bell cow, every conference has an bell cow. Bell cow in this conference is 10. Don't get it twisted. I coached against Kansas for how many years? I can't remember how many years I was at Oklahoma. 12, something like that. You don't lose your status because you had an off year or so. They still got what top. When they talk about those South, people want to say, well, one of the best coaches in 400. Oh, it's not. It's one of the best coaches in the 80 era. He's still coaching. There's the fan-based. Yes, I would say this, and I say this from having been around a lot. I think the best basketball program in America is Kansas. I would take it over anybody else's program. So, everybody's gonna be territorial with their program. This through Kentucky, North Carolina, this go. But when you walk into Alabama's.
Okay, so some interesting comments there from Kelvin Sampson, and obviously Houston's been the team that's won the league last year. I mean, it's not just winning the league; it's the record. It's going undefeated on the road last year. Like, that is pretty incredible. I get what he's saying though. Like, to me, I think it's a conversation of like who's the best team right now versus the best program. Historically, Kansas is the best program in this conference, right? I mean, when you look at the Final Fours, the national titles, the consistent relevancy, and the blue blood status, and all those things. But if you're talking best team right now in the conference, I think that is Houston. So I think it just kind of depends how you view that answer.
Well, and I would actually be interested to look at like Kelvin again in that. Mm-hmm. Kelvin made several comments today about his transfer portal, and he is an old school guy, so there's no questioning where he stands on some of this multi-time transfer business and all of that. But Kelvin pointed out, like, in the transfer portal era, whether it's Houston, Kansas, Iowa State, Arizona, you're going to have a down year every so often because, truthfully, like, guys just move too often to not. And he was more saying that that's kind of more what the last couple of years, as the person preparing for Kansas, feels like than anything. He was quick to point out your man Peterson. You keep going on about, which feels like a very consistent theme of the day for everyone in the Big 12.
He's very good at basketball.
He's very good, which helps a lot. I think it's interesting too, though, because look, when I look at Houston last year, you mentioned undefeated on the road. They were like milliseconds away from that not happening.
Yeah.
I don't mean to bring up.
It's hard in the Big 12.
Yeah, and I don't mean to bring up bad memories, but it was Kansas. But the week prior it was UCF, and Houston wins those two games at the buzzer. And Central Florida being a program that people didn't think as highly of, obviously. Frankly, each of those games helped propel Houston. Both of those programs kind of stuttered after that. Had those shots not fallen, it's a whole different deal. And one of those shots was against Kansas in Fog Allen. Yeah. Fog Allen has a role to play in Kansas' program in a way that I think everyone is a little envious of. We're all building towards having what do you call the chanting that the
the rock chalk chant? Yeah.
I mean, it really it's ominous in a lot of ways, right? And so I think that's part of it too. Is like that can propel a team that maybe isn't supposed to win to where they win anyway, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just building that confidence. And to your point, like last year, I remember at the end of the season, I forget if it was Ryland Griffin or Zeke Mayo. I thought it was Ryland who said after the season, like, it kind of all goes back to that Houston loss when things started to fall apart. And, like, that was at the end of the season, which, like, that clearly was still on their mind at that point. So, like, you can say momentum is a real thing, you know? And it just is interesting, like, I don't know, like, Houston was such a good team last season that it might not have mattered. But I have a hard time thinking with the way that you guys beat Duke in the Final Four, do you wonder if Houston doesn't win the Kansas game in kind of a similar fashion, right, where you're having to come from behind and scramble, are they able to rely on that experience and win that Duke game? It's possible they do, but, like, who knows?
And Purdue in the Sweet 16 about a week earlier.
In a road environment, basically,
Frankly, yeah. And I feel like, honestly, one of the calling cards of Sampson in the last several years of being Houston is they win more close games than they lose like that. And I do think, like you're saying, it's once you've got the experience, it's not necessarily that you run the exact same set, exact same play, get the ball to the exact same guy. It's that in the timeout huddle, no one is nearly as nervous in March and April in that situation because you know it worked out in February and January. You know it worked out at Kansas. So in a neutral environment that is Indianapolis with Purdue, you know it'll work, right? You just have faith in it working, and that, frankly, goes a long way in just, like, making the play happen. I don't mean to dwell on that, but part of being a bell cow, I would imagine, would be using kind of as a trampoline back up to where Kansas has been. You hear Sampson say that. Do you feel like there is that trajectory this year at Kansas? Is that a fair assessment of where the program's at?
Yeah, I do feel like they're going to get back there. Now, it is interesting because it still does, to me, feel like Houston's kind of on their own tier. If you're picking the conference standings, I would probably have Houston in Tier 1. I would probably have the Tier 2 with, a lot of schools with Kansas, Arizona, Iowa State would be up there. I feel like I'm missing one off the top of my head. I forget if I said Arizona. Texas Tech, obviously, BYU. There we go. So there's a lot of schools, I think, there that are rustling with them. I do feel like, from this year perspective, and I'd be curious to hear your take on this, I feel like the ceiling is still the same for Houston, like national title good. I feel like for Kansas this year, I'll be interested to see where that ceiling goes. If you do end up having the best player in the country with Darryn Peterson, maybe that is the ceiling once again. But I do feel like the floor this year is lower for Houston than it was. Not to say that they're going to hit the floor, but you're counting on freshmen. Like, what if the freshmen don't work out, right? And obviously that's hypocritical for me to say with Darryn Peterson, right? Because, but it can happen. But it's a scary place to be, I think, for both of us. That, like, okay, I think Darryn Peterson's going to be really good. I think Cole Rosario is going to be good. I'm sure you think that, like, Harwell and Senac and stuff are going to be good. But, like, what if one of them does have one? Because it feels like there's a couple McDonald's All-Americans every year that, it just doesn't work out for whatever reason, right? And what does that necessarily mean? And so if those things do happen, though, it does feel like to me that Kansas can get back to that point, because you look at some of the previous years that Bill Self has had an All-American lead guard, which, again, Darryn Peterson's going to be that All-American lead guard for them. It's Sharon Collins, where they win the Big 12 back-to-back years. They get the number one overall seed in the NCAA tournament his second year. It's Frank Mason winning National Player of the Year when they get a 1 seed, make the Elite Eight. It's Devontae Graham when they get a 1 seed, make the Final Four. It's Devon Dotson when the tournament gets canceled, but they would have been the number one overall seed in the NCAA tournament. When he has All-American lead guards, they do really well. So yes, I feel like they're going to get back to that point this year. And honestly, the only thing that kind of stinks about all this is we only get Kansas and Houston once.
I know, and like I guess there are some things you preserve and some things you don't. This feels more like a part of the conference getting too big, right, where you only get to play each other once in some of the cases. I would point out, you mentioned about Houston's floor. We'll talk preview the basketball season a lot, frankly, on Houston Channel and all of it. You're going to start at least one freshman. You're probably going to start two for a chunk of the year by some point. The second one's going to work their way in. I only think one of them is a one-and-done guy, if I'm being really honest with myself. And so that means that those other guys are going to have kinks where through. Last year, Houston was 4-3.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people forget because they think, but they were 4-3. I could see Houston in December also having a couple of losses and just working through that as a program, like you're saying, because they have those freshmen. But I guess there is always a chance that you don't, right?
Right.
And that's part of it. I think
and
they
lower
will, but
floor. representative to Houston, right? A lower floor could mean, you got a 2 seed in the NCAA. You know what I mean? Like it's yeah.
Which is, having been a Houston fan for a while,
weird.
You go into 2014. I'm like, what are you talking about?
All right, let's continue on with this. I also want to dig into some of our takeaways from here, and let's get back into that conference conversation, the SEC versus the Big 12, because I have an interesting take on that as one of my big takeaways from this. This episode of the show is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August of 2025. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but. From smooth handling to intuitive controls, they have all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, so you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail with Mazda because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. Thanks for joining us on this Locked On crossover edition. Parker Ainsworth, Derek Johnson, Locked On Cougs, Locked On Jayhawks. If you are watching us on YouTube, and thanks for making us your first listen every day, by the way. You can subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcast. There is a light that's been going off and on us. We're not like under arrest or something like that. I promise that's the case.
Blue and red, though, a lot of...
Yeah. That's true. So some of our biggest takeaways from this, honestly, one of my biggest takeaways was how big AJ DeBonsa is, which that was a little earlier. I don't know. Do you have any big takeaways from just being here or the event itself or just kind of the fun factor of being here, so to speak?
Well, it's been interesting. Whenever I see Kelvin in these kind of situations, I'm trying to pinch in who is Kelvin talking to, who is Kelvin, and Kelvin had an interesting interaction, I thought, where he and I believe it's Jensen, the new coach at Utah, were clearly, and I don't know the full background story, but there was clearly a mutual respect there. That was like, oh, that's the new guy on the block. How you've already built that up, right? Obviously, super respectful of self and Scott Drew at Baylor and all different guys that he knows, but was very quick to go reach out and say, hey, how you doing, et cetera, with Jensen. I was like, okay, well, clearly there's something there. Maybe Jensen's a better coach than I have understanding of or has something going on there, right? You mentioned the size of guys. I also think it's been interesting to see, bluntly, which guys people bring, right? Yeah. Houston's under Sampson typically brought upperclassmen. Several programs brought their star freshmen. Houston left those guys at home. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what that means about, get the guys that, BYU brings in AJ DeBonsa because he is the big meal ticket in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. But does that say something about their upperclassmen that we're not really thinking about? What are we putting together there and we see it happen? Or is he just that good? He could just be that good. He could just, Kansas has their own star freshman. What have you picked up on the day as the days unfolded with a lot of basketball conversation? It's been all day.
Yeah, honestly, going back to the conference, I don't know, is it the best conference? That kind of conversation, and you heard Scott Drew up there mentioning, I forget what the number was, 8 of the last 12 years or whatever on Ken Pom, being the number one league or something like that. And thinking more about this, because I do think you can make the argument that, the SEC had a better season last year than the Big 12 did. But I go back to this, and it's I think of this from a football perspective, right? The Big 10 had a better football season in 2024 than the SEC did, right?
Maybe 2023 as well.
Yeah, maybe. And who knows, maybe even this year, right? Because the SEC has a lot of good teams. But, anyway, point being, yet you won't hear SEC fans relent the fact that they don't have the best conference. Because they'll say, okay, I get it, maybe you were better last year, but over the longevity, over the long haul, it's been us, and look at all these. So then why does it work the other way in basketball? Why does 1 year of saying, hey, we have the better basketball conference, when the Big 12 has been the better basketball conference for the 8 previous years before that, why does that all of a sudden mean that the Big 12 no longer is the best basketball conference? Well, why is it different for the two spots? That's stupid to me.
Interestingly, too, in basketball versus football, the exodus of Texas and Oklahoma did not hurt it in basketball the same way it did in football.
Heck, maybe it even helped because they were able to add Houston
and BYU and AJ DeBonsa and Arizona and all these different places, right? And so maybe that's part of it as well. It's an interesting take because we do compare the two sports live, but it's a very opposite reaction.
Yes, because again, the SEC, it's Big Ten might have had a better year, but overall the long haul. But then it's one good year of basketball, and boom, all of a sudden it's a better conference. I don't know. Just a thought, and I do think we are going to get the full I don't want to say resurgence, because again, I think the Big 12 is still has been at the top even last year, where even if you want to make that argument, but it's you look at all those schools, I do think Arizona is good enough to make a Final Four, win a national title. I do think Baylor is going to be a team that's going to surprise some people and could be, kind of a second weekend team. Iowa State's been just really tough year in and year out. I mean, if Jerome Tang is right about having all those things, they're a national title contender. Kansas, I think, is going to be back in a real way. I think they're going to be a top 10 team this year. Houston, number 1 team in the country, right? You go on and on. I think West Virginia could be an NCAA tournament team. Texas Tech's going to be a national title contender. BYU, I think, can be a national title contender. So you go on and on and on down the list. I am a believer in the Big 12 this year. I know we're here at Big 12 Media Days, drink the Big 12 Kool-Aid, whatever, but I don't know. I truly do believe it, and I do think that when you look at, Bruce Pearl now leaving Auburn, when you look at some of the players leaving the SEC from last year to this year, I think we're going to be fully back this year into being the Big 12's the best conference.
Well, and I also think it's worth pointing out, Florida wins national title, so that's their SEC's, one of their ribbons or feathers in their cap. But Tech had them on the ropes, Houston had them on the ropes, and as much as it hurts to admit, both those teams probably should have won those games. Right, and if either one of those games goes differently, we can't even give them last year.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, just honestly, if Tech could beat Florida in the Elite Eight, the Big 12 would have had half the Final Four and a likely
Who knows?
champion.
What if Tech beats Auburn, and then what if you get Tech Houston
a Big
for the
12?
national title,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, God, that would have actually that would have been a little crazy. Crazy conference, and it's going to be a big year for the conference, a lot of fun. I'm sure you're previewing all the way up until November with the way things are going to the Jayhawks, right?
That's right. And this Friday, actually, KU has an exhibition game with Louisville, so that's certainly making things more fun. So that's going to do it for this little crossover episode. Parker, where can you check out all your work?
Locked On Cougs, everywhere you get your podcast, free and available on all platforms. You mentioned exhibitions. Houston's got Mississippi, speaking of SEC Big 12, Mississippi State this weekend, an exhibition, as well as a big football game with Arizona State. We've got to break down more of, too. That San Levitt guy is good. We'll talk about it, I promise. Go check out Locked On Cougs.
A big week for us, too. KU, K-State, and obviously the exhibition versus Louisville on the road. So we'll be breaking that down as well. Locked On Jayhawks. He's Parker. I'm Derek. See you next time with another Locked On crossover or one of those 2 episodes. Bye.